The diplomatic station hung in space like a giant metal flower, with its arms stretched toward distant stars. Inside the main meeting hall, Jake Morrison sat at a curved table, made from some kind of blue crystal that seemed to glow from within. He had never seen anything like it back on Earth, but then again, he had never been this far from home before. Across from him sat two beings that looked like they had stepped out of fantasy books and science fiction movies. The first was Lyra, who looked almost human, except for her pointed ears and silver hair that moved like liquid mercury when she turned her head. Her skin had a pale glow to it, and her green eyes seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. She wore robes that shifted color from deep forest green to sky blue, depending on how the light hit them. The second alien was completely different. Zara belonged to a species called the crystalline hegemony, and she looked like a giant insect that had learned to walk upright. Her body was covered in plates that looked like polished gemstones, and she had 4 arms instead of 2. Each arm ended in hands with too many fingers that moved with disturbing grace. Her head was triangular with large compound eyes that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Captain Lisa Brooks sat next to Jake, along with Amy Chen, who kept taking notes on everything she saw. Amy was their xenobiologist, and she seemed fascinated by every detail of their alien hosts. Lisa wore her military uniform with pride, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. This meeting would decide whether humanity joined the galactic community as equals or as servants. The station belonged to neither species, but served as neutral ground for important meetings like this one. Jake had spent 3 days traveling here from Earth, and the journey had given him time to study everything they knew about these two civilizations. The Sylvan Coalition controlled dozens of worlds, and had technology that seemed like magic. The crystalline hegemony was younger, but had military power that made other species think twice before challenging them. Both groups had been in space for thousands of years, while humans had barely managed to leave their own solar system. That fact seemed to amuse their hosts greatly. Lyra spoke first, and her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She welcomed them to the station and explained the basic rules of galactic civilization. There were trade routes to respect, shipping lanes to follow, and territories that belonged to established species. Newcomers like humanity would need to prove themselves worthy of membership in the galactic community. Zara made clicking sounds when she talked, and a translation device turned her words into English. She explained that the galaxy was a dangerous place, full of hostile environments and aggressive species. Only the strong survived, and only the proven could be trusted with important responsibilities. Jake listened carefully, while Amy asked questions about galactic law, and Captain Brooks discussed military protocols. The aliens answered politely, but Jake could hear the condescension in their voices. They talked to humans the way adults might talk to children who were asking about grown-up things they could not understand. The conversation turned to Earth itself, and Jake felt his jaw tighten. Lyra called it a garden world, with stable weather and predictable seasons. She said it sounded lovely for a vacation, but hardly the kind of place that would produce strong warriors or skilled explorers. Her own people had survived the great burning that had consumed half their homeworld centuries ago. That experience had taught them to be tough and resourceful. Zara agreed, and described how her species had endured the crystal caves during their planet's ice age. They had learned to survive in conditions that would kill most other beings. She looked at the humans with something that might have been pity, and suggested that Earth creatures were probably too soft for the harsh realities of galactic life. Amy tried to explain human achievements in science and technology, but both aliens seemed unimpressed. They had seen it all before, from dozens of other species who thought they were special. Humans would need to prove themselves just like everyone else, and that would take time. Captain Brooks mentioned human military history, but Lyra waved a graceful hand dismissively. Wars between primitive tribes on a single world were nothing compared to conflicts that spanned star systems. Humans had never faced real challenges or real enemies. Jake kept taking notes and watching both aliens carefully. He had learned long ago that the best way to handle difficult people was to let them talk first. They would eventually tell him everything he needed to know about their weaknesses and blind spots. The meeting lasted 6 hours and ended with conditional acceptance. Humans could join the galactic community as junior partners under the supervision of more experienced species. They would get safe trade routes in peaceful sectors and could establish colonies on worlds that nobody else wanted. Jake thanked them politely and shook hands with both aliens. Lirale seemed surprised by the human custom, while Zara found it amusing. They scheduled another meeting for the following day to discuss details. After the aliens left, Amy slumped in her chair and rubbed her temples. She had expected the meeting to be difficult but not quite this insulting. Captain Brooks paced around the room, muttering under her breath about arrogant aliens who did not know what they were talking about. Jake just smiled and opened his tablet to review the notes he had taken. Tomorrow would be more interesting than today. The second day of negotiations began with discussions about territorial claims and shipping routes through various star systems. Jake arrived early and found the meeting room already occupied by Lirale and her aide Vera, who looked younger but shared the same silver hair and pointed ears. Zara had brought additional crystalline beings whose names Jake could not pronounce despite the translation devices. Captain Brooks and Amy joined them along with Dr. Kate Williams, who appeared as a hologram transmitted from Earth. Kate was there. Chief Meteorologist and Jake had specifically requested her presence for reasons he had not yet explained to his colleagues. Commander Beth Taylor also joined them via holographic link. She was their military advisor and had been monitoring the negotiations from Earth with growing frustration. The condescending attitude of their alien hosts had not improved overnight. Lirale began by displaying a three-dimensional map of local space that showed trade routes connecting various star systems. The established routes were color-coded with green, indicating safe passage, and red marking dangerous areas, where ships were frequently lost to raiders or environmental hazards. She pointed to several green routes and explained that these would be available to human ships once they proved themselves capable of handling interstellar commerce. The routes passed through peaceful systems with stable governments and predictable conditions. Zara added that humans would need to demonstrate their ships could handle basic space travel before being granted access to more challenging routes. She gestured toward the red zones and made it clear that these were reserved for species with proven survival capabilities. Amy asked about the criteria for proving human capabilities, but the answers were vague. Both alien species seemed to believe that time alone would demonstrate whether humans were worthy of full membership in the galactic community. The conversation turned to planetary colonization rights, and here the aliens became even more dismissive. Lirale explained that the best worlds were already claimed by established species, while the remaining planets were either too dangerous or too resource-poor to be worth fighting over. She showed them images of available worlds, and Jake had to admit they looked challenging. One planet experienced constant volcanic activity, while another was locked in an eternal ice age. A third world had an atmosphere so thick with storms that the surface was rarely visible from space. Vera commented that these worlds might be suitable for humans, since they came from such a comfortable planet themselves. She suggested that any species from a garden world like Earth would probably prefer gentler environments anyway. Zara agreed and pointed out that human physiology seemed designed for stable conditions. She had studied the biological data Earth had provided and noted that humans appeared fragile compared to other galactic species. Their temperature tolerance was narrow, their atmospheric requirements were specific, and they seemed to need frequent rest and nutrition. Dr. Kate spoke up from her holographic projection and asked about the specific environmental challenges that made these worlds unsuitable for colonization. She wanted technical data about atmospheric conditions, surface temperatures, and weather patterns. Lirelei seemed amused by the request and began describing the volcanic world in detail. The surface temperatures could reach 800 degrees during eruptions, and the air was filled with toxic gases that would kill most oxygen-breathing species within minutes. Zara took over and described the frozen world, where temperatures dropped to -40 degrees for entire seasons. The ice storms could last for weeks, and the wind speeds regularly exceeded 60 miles per hour. No vegetation could survive on the surface, and any settlement would need to be built underground. Kate nodded thoughtfully and asked for more specific data about wind speeds, storm duration, and temperature ranges. The aliens provided the information readily, since it seemed to support their argument that humans were not equipped for such harsh, foreign environments. Jake watched the exchange carefully while taking notes on his tablet. He could see Amy and Beth exchanging worried glances as the aliens continued to classify Earth as a Class 3 comfortable world with minimal environmental challenges. The discussion moved to military considerations, and here, Zara took the lead. She explained that galactic civilization included many hostile species that viewed newcomers as potential threats or easy targets. Only species with proven combat effectiveness were trusted with important defensive responsibilities. She described conflicts her people had fought against raiders who attacked from asteroid belts and pirates who used stealth technology to ambush merchant vessels. The crystalline hegemony had earned their position in galactic society by demonstrating they could protect their own territory and assist their allies when needed. Lirelei added that her people had survived invasion attempts by providing environmental advantages that hostile species could not overcome. Elven worlds included forests that could hide entire armies and weather patterns that confused enemy navigation systems. Both aliens looked at the human representatives with expressions that might have been sympathetic. Earth had no such natural defenses, and human military technology seemed primitive compared to galactic standards. How could humans hope to defend themselves against enemies who had been fighting interstellar wars for millennia? Commander Taylor tried to explain human military history and tactical innovations, but the aliens remained unimpressed. Wars fought with chemical explosives and kinetic weapons seemed quaint compared to energy shields and plasma cannons. Jake continued taking notes, while his colleagues grew increasingly frustrated with the aliens' casual dismissal of human capabilities. The meeting stretched into its 6th hour with little progress toward recognizing humans as equals in galactic society. Near the end of the session, Lirelei made an offhand comment that revealed more than she probably intended. She mentioned that elven worlds regularly experienced firestorms that lasted for months and required entire populations to shelter in underground cities. Zara responded by describing ice cycles on crystalline worlds, where surface temperatures remained below freezing for years at a time. Her people had learned to hibernate in crystal caves until conditions improved. Both aliens seemed proud of their species' ability to endure such challenges, and they looked at the humans with expressions that clearly conveyed their belief that Earth creatures had never faced real hardship. Jake closed his tablet and thanked them for the detailed information about galactic environmental conditions. He suggested they continue the discussion the following day, when he might have additional questions about their experiences with extreme weather. After the aliens left, Amy shook her head in disbelief, while Captain Brooks muttered something about arrogant species who thought they knew everything. Dr. Kate signed off with a promise to prepare additional meteorological data for the next session. Jake just smiled and began preparing for tomorrow, when he would finally get the chance to educate their hosts about the real meaning of extreme weather. The 3rd day of negotiations focused on colony rights and planetary classifications. Jake entered the meeting room with his tablet loaded with specific data that Dr. Kate had transmitted overnight. He also carried a small device that Captain Brooks had provided for displaying Earth's meteorological information. Lirelei and Vera were already seated when the humans arrived, and they looked more relaxed than during previous sessions. Zara entered with her usual clicking gait, followed by two other crystalline beings who served as scientific advisors. Amy and Captain Brooks took their usual seats, while Commander Taylor joined them again via holographic link. Dr. Kate was also standing by on Earth, ready to provide additional technical information if needed. The aliens began by reviewing their classification system for habitable worlds. Class 1 planets were considered paradise worlds with perfect climates and no environmental hazards. Class 2 worlds had minor challenges like seasonal variations or occasional storms, but remained comfortable for most species. Class 3 worlds, like Earth, fell into the middle category, with moderate environmental challenges that required some adaptation, but posed no serious threats to established civilizations. Class 4 and 5 worlds were considered hostile with extreme conditions that made colonization difficult or impossible. Lirelay displayed images of various worlds to illustrate each classification. The Class 1 worlds looked like perfect tropical islands with crystal-clear oceans and gentle breezes. Class 2 worlds showed seasonal changes and moderate weather patterns, similar to temperate regions on Earth. The Class 4 and 5 worlds looked genuinely hostile, with raging storms constant, volcanic activity, or frozen wastelands that stretched to every horizon. These were the worlds that only the toughest species could hope to colonize, and even then, only with significant technological assistance. Zara explained that colony rights were distributed based on species classifications and proven capabilities. Newcomers like humans would naturally start with Class 3 worlds that matched their home environment. As they gained experience and demonstrated their abilities, they might earn access to more challenging territories. Vera added that this system protected newer species from attempting colonization projects beyond their capabilities. Too many promising civilizations had destroyed themselves by trying to expand too quickly into environments they could not handle. Jake listened patiently while the aliens outlined their careful approach to galactic expansion. Everything they said made logical sense from their perspective, but they were working with incomplete information about human capabilities. The conversation turned to specific examples of environmental challenges that made certain worlds unsuitable for most species. Lirelay mentioned firestorms that could consume entire continents and last 4 months without relief. She described how her people had learned to survive these events by building underground cities and developing early warning systems that could predict when conditions would become dangerous. The firestorms on elven worlds could reach temperatures of 800 degrees and move at speeds that made evacuation impossible once they began. Zara responded by discussing ice cycles that affected crystalline worlds. These were not simple seasonal changes, but climate shifts that could last for decades. Surface temperatures would drop to -40 degrees and stay there for years, while ice storms raged across every landmass. Her people had adapted by learning to hibernate in crystal caves that provided protection from the cold and wind. The ice storms could generate wind speeds of 80 miles per hour and deposit several feet of ice in a single night. Both aliens seemed proud of their species' ability to survive such extreme conditions, and they looked at the humans with expressions that conveyed both sympathy and condescension. Earth creatures had simply never faced real environmental challenges. Jake had been waiting for this moment throughout 3 days of negotiations. He opened his tablet and activated the display device that Captain Brooks had provided. The holographic projection showed a 3-dimensional map of Earth with weather patterns highlighted in different colors. He looked directly at Lirelay and spoke for the first time since the session began. "You mentioned firestorms that reached 800 degrees. How large an area do they typically cover?" Lirelay seemed surprised by the question, but answered readily. The largest firestorms could affect regions the size of small continents, and they moved at speeds that made prediction difficult. "Why do you ask?" Jake nodded thoughtfully and turned to Zara. "And your ice cycles drop temperatures to -40 degrees for years at a time. What wind speeds do you typically see during the worst storms? Zara clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement. Ice storms on our worlds can generate winds exceeding 80 miles per hour, and they can maintain that intensity for weeks. Our ancestors learned to recognize the warning signs and prepare accordingly. Jake manipulated the controls on his display device, and the holographic projection of Earth began showing detailed weather data. Temperature readings appeared over different regions along with wind speed measurements and storm tracking information. "That is interesting," he said quietly. "On Earth we call those Tuesday afternoons in some places." The room fell completely silent. Both alien species stopped their casual conversation and focused entirely on Jake as he began manipulating the Earth weather display. He pointed to a region labeled Death Valley and called up temperature records. Surface temperatures here regularly exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. That translates to about 54 degrees Celsius. We have recorded ground temperatures over 200 degrees. Lirale leaned forward in her chair while Vera made rapid calculations on her own device. Those temperatures were approaching the levels of their most dangerous firestorms. Jake continued by highlighting polar regions where temperatures dropped far below anything Zara had described. Antarctica regularly sees temperatures of minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That is minus 73 Celsius. These conditions persist for months and cover an area larger than most of your worlds. Zara forearms gestured nervously as she processed this information. The coldest conditions on crystalline worlds were tropical compared to Earth's normal winter weather. But Jake was just getting started. He activated storm tracking data, and the display showed massive spiral formations moving across ocean surfaces. "These are hurricanes," he explained. "They generate wind speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour and can maintain that intensity for days or weeks." The hologram showed satellite footage of Hurricane Patricia as it approached the Mexican coast, with wind speeds that made Zara ice storms look like gentle breezes. Amy and Captain Brooks exchanged amazed glances as they realized what Jake was doing. He had spent 3 days listening to aliens boast about their environmental challenges, while knowing that Earth weather made their worst conditions look mild. Commander Taylor smiled from her holographic projection as she watched the alien expressions change from condescension to shock to something approaching fear. Jake highlighted Tornado Alley on the display and brought up footage of F5 tornadoes carving paths of destruction across the American Midwest. We have a region where the atmosphere regularly produces rotating columns of wind exceeding 300 miles per hour. These can appear with little warning and destroy everything in their path. Vera whispered something to Lirale in their musical language, while Zara crystalline advisors clicked rapidly among themselves. Jake looked up from his display and met their eyes calmly. "You said Earth was a Class 3 comfortable world with minimal environmental challenges. Perhaps we should discuss reclassifying it." Jake stood up from his chair and walked to the center of the room where his holographic display could be seen clearly by everyone present. The weather data from Earth continued to scroll across the projection, showing storm systems that dwarfed anything the aliens had described. Lirale and Vera sat in stunned silence while Zara forearms moved in agitated patterns that her translation device could not interpret. The casual arrogance that had marked 3 days of negotiations had completely disappeared. "I should probably tell you about my background," Jake said, as he manipulated the display to show a map of the American Midwest. "Before I became a diplomat, I spent 15 years as a storm chaser and emergency responder in a region we call Tornado Alley." The map highlighted a corridor stretching from Texas to Nebraska, where tornado activity concentrated during spring and summer months. Red dots marked the locations of significant tornado touchdowns over the past decade, and there were hundreds of them. Amy leaned forward with interest since she had never heard Jake discuss his previous career in detail. Captain Brooks watched the alien reactions carefully, while Commander Taylor Observed from her holographic link, Jake pointed to a cluster of red dots in Oklahoma. This is where I grew up and learned to read weather patterns. By the time I was 16, I could predict tornado formation 3 hours in advance, just by watching cloud movements and feeling changes in air pressure. He activated video footage of an F5 tornado moving across open farmland. The massive funnel cloud stretched from ground to sky, with debris swirling around its base like a deadly snow globe. Wind speeds in tornadoes, like this one, exceed 200 miles per hour at the base, and can reach 300 miles per hour in the center. The pressure differential is so extreme that buildings explode from the inside when the tornado passes over them. Vera made a small sound that might have been a gasp, while Zara mandibles clicked rapidly. Neither species had encountered weather phenomena that combined such extreme wind speeds with localized destruction. Jake continued by showing footage of storm chasers driving directly toward tornado formations. These are my colleagues and I pursuing an F4 tornado in Kansas. We do this voluntarily to gather scientific data and provide early warning to populated areas. The video showed vehicles racing across country roads, while massive tornadoes churned across the landscape behind them. Radio chatter between storm chasers filled the audio as they coordinated their positions and shared wind speed measurements. Relay found her voice and asked why anyone would voluntarily approach such dangerous phenomena. On elven worlds, people fled from firestorms and sought shelter until they passed. Jake smiled and brought up more footage showing storm chasers setting up monitoring equipment directly in the path of approaching tornadoes. We study them to understand how they form and how to predict their behavior. Knowledge removes fear, and fear clouds judgment. He switched to displaying wildfire data, and the hologram showed vast areas of California and Australia consumed by flames. You mentioned firestorms that affect continental areas. These are from last year alone. The satellite imagery showed fire fronts stretching for hundreds of miles with temperatures exceeding 1500 degrees Fahrenheit at the center. Smoke columns rose into the stratosphere and could be seen from space stations. One fire in Australia burned an area larger than most of your smaller moons, Jake explained. The flames moved at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour and generated their own weather systems, including fire tornadoes. He activated footage of fire tornadoes spinning across burning landscapes like something from a nightmare. These combine the destructive power of wildfires with tornado wind speeds. They can throw burning debris for miles and create new fire fronts wherever they touch down. Zara. Four arms had stopped moving entirely as she processed the implications of weather systems that combine multiple extreme phenomena into single events. Jake brought up ice storm data next, focusing on regions where freezing rain created conditions far worse than anything the crystalline species had described. These storms coat everything in layers of ice that can be several inches thick. The hologram showed power lines snapping under the weight of accumulated ice while trees split apart from the cold. Vehicles became trapped in ice shells and buildings collapsed under loads they were never designed to support. But the real challenge comes from ice tornadoes, Jake continued. These form when winter storm systems create rotating ice columns that move across frozen landscapes at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. He showed rare footage of ice tornadoes moving across the Great Lakes region during a severe winter storm. The spinning columns of ice and snow created destruction patterns similar to regular tornadoes, but left everything they touched encased in frozen debris. Captain Brooks spoke up for the first time during the session. Jake here spent 3 days in a vehicle surrounded by an F4 tornado outbreak documenting wind patterns and pressure changes. He won a scientific medal for the data he collected. Amy added that the research Jake conducted had led to improved tornado prediction systems that saved thousands of lives each year. His work was considered essential to understanding severe weather phenomena. Jake brought up one final display showing global temperature extremes and weather events from the past year. Death Valley ground temperatures approaching 200 degrees, Antarctic wind chills below -100 degrees, hurricane wind speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. We have children who walk to school in weather conditions that would kill your warriors, he said quietly. Not because we are cruel to our young, but because we teach them from an early age how to read environmental conditions and adapt to changing circumstances. Vera whispered something to Lirelei, who responded in their musical language. Both Elven representatives looked shaken by the realization that their greatest environmental challenges were routine weather events on Earth. Zara finally found her voice and asked how human civilization survived in such extreme conditions. Her crystalline people had developed hibernation strategies and underground cities to escape their worst weather, but humans seemed to live on the surface throughout everything Earth could produce. Jake smiled and closed his tablet. We do not just survive extreme weather. We study it, predict it, and some of us chase it for fun. Our children learn to recognize tornado formation before they learn to drive vehicles. Our farmers plant crops based on hurricane tracking data. Our cities are built to withstand earthquakes and floods and blizzards. He looked around the room at faces that showed dawning respect mixed with something approaching fear. Earth did not produce weak creatures who needed protection from galactic dangers, he concluded. Earth produced a species that learned to thrive in conditions that would challenge your strongest warriors. Perhaps you should reconsider which species needs guidance from others. The fourth day of negotiations began with a completely different atmosphere than the previous sessions. Jake arrived to find both alien delegations waiting for him with expressions of respect that had been entirely absent before. Lirelei and Vera stood when he entered, while Zara made formal clicking sounds that the translation device rendered as ceremonial greetings. General Susan Harper had arrived overnight from Earth, and now sat beside Captain Brooks, in full military dress uniform. Dr. Maya Patel joined them via holographic link, as their leading expert on climate adaptation and survival technologies. The meeting room itself had been rearranged with the human delegation now seated as equals rather than junior partners seeking approval. The condescending tone that had marked 3 days of negotiations was completely gone. Lirelei spoke first, and her musical voice carried formal tones that indicated official diplomatic language. On behalf of the Sylvan Coalition, I wish to formally apologize for underestimating the capabilities and experience of the human species. Our assumptions were based on incomplete data and cultural prejudices that have no place in serious diplomatic negotiations. Vera added that Elven scientists were requesting detailed environmental data about Earth for their climate research archives. The weather phenomena Jake had described exceeded their theoretical models for planetary atmospheric behavior. Zara responded with rapid clicking that conveyed similar sentiments from the crystalline hegemony. Her people were fascinated by human adaptation strategies and wanted to establish research partnerships to study extreme weather survival techniques. Jake accepted their apologies gracefully, while noting that misunderstandings were common during first contact situations. What mattered now was building productive relationships based on accurate information and mutual respect. General Harper took the opportunity to present updated proposals for human participation in galactic civilization. Instead of accepting junior partner status, humanity was now seeking equal representation in trade negotiations and military alliances. Dr. Maya joined the discussion to explain human climate adaptation technologies that might benefit other species facing environmental challenges. Earth had developed warning systems, predictive models, and survival techniques that could be applied to extreme conditions throughout the galaxy. The conversation turned to exploration opportunities, and here the dynamic shifted completely. Both alien species began discussing worlds that had been considered too dangerous for colonization, but might be suitable for human settlement. Lirelei brought up a planet in the Vega system, where constant electrical storms had prevented successful colonization attempts. The surface was bombarded by lightning strikes that could destroy conventional equipment and the atmospheric conditions changed rapidly without warning. She suggested that humans might be able to establish settlements there, since they had experience dealing with similar phenomena on Earth. The planet had valuable mineral resources, but no species had been able to maintain permanent bases due to the electrical activity. Zara described a world where ice storms created conditions similar to Earth. Blizzards, but with crystalline formations that could cut through most materials. Her people had attempted mining operations there, but the environmental hazards proved too extreme for their hibernation strategies. Jake listened to these descriptions with growing interest, while Amy took detailed notes about potential colonization sites. These worlds sounded challenging, but not impossible for human settlement with proper preparation and equipment. General Harper explained that human military doctrine emphasized adaptation and improvisation in hostile environments. Earth forces trained in deserts, Arctic regions, tropical jungles, and urban disaster zones, because they never knew what conditions they might face in combat. She proposed joint exploration missions where human environmental specialists would work alongside alien scientists to assess previously impossible colonization sites. Humans could provide survival expertise, while their alien partners contributed advanced technology and space travel capabilities. Lireley found this proposal intriguing, since it would allow access to worlds that had been written off as uninhabitable. The Sylvan Coalition controlled many systems with planets that fell into this category, and any successful colonization would expand their territory significantly. Zara agreed and suggested that military cooperation would benefit all parties involved. Human resilience, combined with crystalline technology, could create exploration teams capable of operating in conditions that would defeat either species working alone. The discussion moved to trade arrangements, and here the aliens offered terms that would have been unthinkable during the first day of negotiations. Instead of restricting humans to safe routes, they proposed joint ventures that would give humanity access to the most profitable shipping lanes in exchange for environmental consulting services. Dr. Maya explained that Earth had developed prediction models for solar storms, volcanic activity, seismic events, and atmospheric disturbances that could benefit spacefaring civilizations. These technologies could prevent costly losses of ships and cargo in hazardous regions. Vera asked about human recreational activities related to extreme weather and seemed fascinated by Jake's explanation of storm chasing as a hobby pursued by civilians for personal satisfaction rather than scientific necessity. The idea that humans voluntarily sought out dangerous weather phenomena for entertainment was difficult for both alien species to comprehend. Their cultures emphasized survival and safety, while human culture apparently celebrated risk-taking and challenge-seeking. Jake described storm-chasing festivals where hundreds of people gathered to pursue tornado formations across multiple states. These events combined scientific research with recreational adventure and attracted participants from around the world. Zara asked whether all humans possessed such extreme risk tolerance, or if storm chasers represented an unusual subset of the population. The answer would affect how they evaluated human suitability for dangerous exploration missions. Jake explained that while not everyone chose to chase storms, most humans were comfortable with environmental conditions that would challenge other species. Children played outside during thunderstorms. Farmers worked through blizzards and coastal populations routinely weathered hurricanes that would force evacuations on other worlds. This cultural difference had significant implications for galactic exploration, since it suggested humans might be uniquely suited for colonizing hostile environments that other species avoided. The negotiations concluded with treaty frameworks that recognized humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization rather than a junior member requiring supervision. Trade agreements provided access to premium shipping routes, while military alliances offered mutual defense pacts between all three species. Lireley formally invited human scientists to visit elven worlds for joint research projects, while Zara proposed exchange programs that would allow crystalline engineers to study human survival technologies. Jake signed the preliminary agreements on behalf of Earth, while General Harper witnessed the ceremony. The treaties would need ratification by their respective governments, but the framework established humanity as a major player in galactic politics. As the formal sessions ended, Lirelei approached Jake privately to express her personal admiration for human resilience. She had initially viewed humans as fragile creatures from a comfortable world, but now understood they were among the toughest species she had encountered. Jake smiled and looked out through the station viewports at the distant stars. Earth had not developed spaceflight to escape the dangers of their homeworld, he explained. They had developed it because surviving those dangers had taught them they could handle anything the universe might offer. The negotiations were complete, and humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through advanced technology or military might, but through the simple demonstration that they were already adapted to conditions that challenged civilizations with thousands of years of galactic experience. Tomorrow, human ships would begin exploring worlds that had been abandoned as too dangerous for colonization, and human settlements would take root in places where other species feared to tread. The galaxy had underestimated Earth creatures, but that mistake would not be repeated.